This is A Story of Sorts, the podcast mostly about bookish stuff. Hello everyone, Karina here. On today's episode, I talk with Adiba Jaigirdar about her new book, Hani And Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating. Have a listen. Hi Adiba.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. I would like to start by asking you to introduce yourself a little bit.
So I'm Adiba Jaigirdar, and I am the author of The Henna Wars and the upcoming Hani And Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating. I was also previously an ESL teacher, and I am from Bangladesh, and I've been living in Ireland for a long time now, since I was 10 years old. So I identify as both Bangladeshi and Irish. I am obsessed with Hayley Kiyoko and Janelle Monáe's music, and I have a lipstick collection that is way too big and it needs to be curbed.
Does it now? Because we need some joy now for the pandemic.
That's true, but with masks, it's like the usefulness of lipstick is going down. So why do I need so many?
True, with all the filters and stuff as well.
Yeah.
What about your new book, Hani And Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating?
Yeah, so Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating is about these two Bengali girls, Hani and Ishu, and they decide to start fake dating. One of them because she feels like she needs to prove her bisexuality to her friends, and the other one because she needs to become more popular, to become head girl in her school. But as their fake relationship starts to become something real, they need to figure out if they're willing to make a few sacrifices for their happily ever after.
And when does it come out?
It comes out May 25th in the US and May 27th in Ireland and the UK.
I've seen both covers and they are gorgeous. I actually thought the UK cover when it came out was like the final cover, because sometimes you have that, you have like a provisional cover and then the final one. They're both so gorgeous.
Yeah, I got really lucky with them, and they're both illustrated by Nabigal Nayagam Haidar Ali, and he just did such a fantastic job on them.
Do you want to talk about your writing journey? How did you start writing and when?
So I've been writing pretty much my entire life. Basically, ever since I learned how to write, I've been writing. And even before I learned how to write, I was telling stories in my head. And a large part of that was because storytelling is a really big part of Bangladeshi culture. So my parents, my family, they really nurtured that in me. I used to be obsessed with books when I was a kid. And whenever my dad would go out, I would always ask him to buy me a book. And he used to always do that. And I used to live in my grandmother's house when I was a kid. And I literally had this like massive cupboard, and it was just filled with like my books. And my grandmother like kept that for a really, really long time until she had to move out of the house, unfortunately. And she was very proud of like that cupboard of my books. So I feel like my family always really supported my love of storytelling. And that just naturally built into like a love of writing. So it's just something I've always been doing.
And is it true that the second book is always more difficult to write than the first, especially when the debut does so well, like the Henna Wars did?
I think probably it is true, because whenever I speak to other authors, they really struggle with their second book. But for me, it was not the case. Actually, writing Hani And Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating, it was the easiest book that I have ever written. It was the fastest book that I've ever written. It went through the least amount of revision that I've ever been through. And I think part of that was because I actually wrote the book before the Henna Wars came out, and I wrote it even before like advanced readers copies of the Henna Wars started going out.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have any expectations, like outside expectations when I was writing it. It was just me and my book. And I just sat down and I wrote it, and I had like so much fun writing it. I think I wrote it in like 30 days.
Wow.
So it was very fast. There were days when I was writing like 5,000, 10,000 words, and it didn't even bother me at all. I was very in the zone when I was writing it. So for me, the second novel was not difficult, but that's because of that very specific place where I was writing it. But I think when Hani And Ishu advanced readers copy started going out, that's when I started feeling a bit of pressure from expectation, because I was thinking like, Well, a lot of people really love the Henna Wars. And I feel like Hani and Ishu and the Henna Wars, they're obviously very similar in a lot of ways, but they're also quite different. So I was worried if, it would meet the expectations. But so far, the response seems to be good. So hopefully that keeps up.
Did you write any of those during NaNoWriMo? Because I followed you a little bit while you were doing one NaNoWriMo. I don't remember exactly which year it was, but you were writing really fast, like a lot of words in a day.
Yes, I draft very fast, but all the words that I write are not always good. So yes, with the Henna Wars, I didn't do it during NaNoWriMo, but I wrote my second draft during Camp NaNoWriMo. I think it was like in June or July. And so my first draft was really rubbish. And I had to essentially rewrite the entire book. And I did most of that during Camp NaNoWriMo.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because I've been talking with a few authors as well and asking that because a lot of them have writing groups. So there's always a little bit of pressure to take part of a NaNoWriMo. So
yeah, I think like I've been doing NaNoWriMo since I was 13. So I try to do it like every year just because it's something fun for me. There's like this like surge in the writing community. Everybody's like together. So I think it's a nice feeling. Even if my NaNoWriMo book ends up going nowhere, I enjoy taking part in it.
You talked a little bit about that just now, but were you worried about the reception of Hani and Ishu's after such a positive reception of the Henna Wars?
Yeah. So when I was writing, I had absolutely no worries because I was just not thinking about any of that. But then as soon as advanced readers copies started going out, I did worry. And I think especially because with the Henna Wars, I obviously did not have an agent when I wrote that book. I revised it by myself. I had a lot of beta readers and then I got an agent. And my agent always sends my drafts to like his interns and stuff. So he sends like readers reports. And then it went on sub. With Hani and Ishu, I wrote it. I sent it to, I think, 2 or 3 of my critique partners. And then it was my agent, my editor. So the Henna Wars, before it had reached readers, it had already been read by, dozens of people. Whereas with Hani and Ishu, I'm pretty sure like about 5 people read it before it went out to like readers. So it was very scary because obviously like the people who read it really enjoyed it, but they are like my team or my friends. So I didn't know what the outside reception would be.
And what was the biggest difference between writing and publishing the Henna Wars and Hani and Issues?
So the biggest difference was basically in the publishing journey, because with the Henna Wars, it was just me doing all the writing and doing all the revision before it got to an agent, before it got to an editor. So it took like a much longer time. I think I started writing it in January 2018. And then obviously it was published in like May 2020. Whereas with Hani and Ishu, I wrote it in a month. I sent it to my agent. He basically immediately sent it to my editor. We went through one round of revisions and now it's coming out in 2020. So it was just a much shorter process. It didn't go through as many rounds of revision. So yeah, very different processes.
And did you use the Pitch Wars, for example? Because I had Crystal Maldonado here with the Fat Chance Charlie Vega a few weeks ago, and she explained to me, because I saw it on Twitter, I wasn't really sure what it was, the Pitch Wars, and she explained to me how important that was. Did you have any experience with that?
No, I wasn't on Pitch Wars. I wasn't like a mentee for anything.
Okay, it was more straightforward to the agent and then publishing.
Yeah, exactly.
And in the Henna Wars, you approach cultural appropriation. And in Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating, you talk about biphobia, but also about Islamophobia. How did you decide you were going to approach these themes in each book?
So with the Henna Wars and cultural appropriation, I think when I was thinking of the idea, I was trying to figure out why would these 2 people have these rival businesses? What would the conflict be? And then I was thinking, if they were both South Asian, the conflict would be very straightforward, that, they both want to do a henna shop. But I thought maybe it needs something a little bit deeper. And then, so I came up with the idea that what if Flavia was Brazilian? And, like henna is not really a part of Brazilian culture, and that could be something. And I could explore like this idea of cultural appropriation because it was something I was having a lot of conversations with my friends about. So it really came with like trying to figure out what the basic plot of the book would be. With Hani And Ishu, I didn't really think about it that much, to be honest. I think it just came very naturally just because obviously like biphobia, Islamophobia, racism is something that like me and my friends would deal with like on a daily basis essentially. So I think just writing a character like Honey, it would feel almost disingenuous to not explore aspects of that.
It's curious because we keep talking about like representation, and I think it feels very real. Like I'm Portuguese, so in the henna wars, I saw this girl speaking Portuguese, and my first reaction was like, "Oh my god, she's speaking Portuguese!" Because I had no idea. Like I had no idea there was some Portuguese on the book, and it's such a joy to just see like even a small part of you in a story when you're not expecting, because it's English speaking book. So it's really nice. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I have to thank my my friends because I wrote out that interaction and I sent it to like multiple of my Brazilian friends. Were like, can you please help me translate this? So yeah, they helped me translate that. So it's all thanks to them.
Because it sounds perfect. Like the you can really tell that whoever helped you write that knows what they're talking about and how people actually communicate with each other. It's really cool to see. Do you have a favorite scene from Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating?
There's a lot of scenes that I really like, so it's a very difficult question. So I'm going to try and say this without giving any spoilers,
Yes.
but I really like the scene, and I know it's towards the end, but I really like the scene where they have their first kiss, just because I really enjoyed writing it, and I think it's a moment that the book really builds up to after a long time. And actually, I don't think I really edited that scene after the first time I wrote it. So I think that really speaks to like how much I enjoyed writing it the first time around.
What about the relationship between sisters? Because albeit different, they are a big part of both books. Would you like to talk a little about that?
So yeah, I really like writing about sisters, but also just siblings in general because I have a massive family. So I have siblings. I have a brother and I have a sister, but also I have a lot of cousins. And in Bangladeshi culture, you're kind of taught that your cousins are essentially like your siblings.
Yeah.
We have the word for sister in Bengali is bun. And then if you have a cousin, we don't actually have a word for cousin in Bangla. We have like if my cousin is my mom's sister's daughter, she would be called my kalatobon, which means she's my sister related to me through my mom's sister, right? So it's very specific, and you can see like the word sister is in there. Yeah. So your cousins are almost seen as your siblings. You know, that's how close your cousins are seen in Bengali culture. So when I was growing up, my sister is actually 10 years younger than me. So
that's a big difference. Yeah.
That's a huge difference. Yeah. So when I was growing up, you know, I didn't have a sister, but I did have a lot of cousins. And I feel like we were essentially like brothers and sisters. We all grew up together. We did everything together. So that's really, I think, where writing sibling dynamics comes to me from. I just think for Bangladeshi people, most of us have siblings. They're a big part of our lives. And I just want to really explore what that looks like, whether it's positive or negative or something in between. I think there are so many ways to, you know, write siblings because we have very complicated relationships with them. We can essentially have any relationship with siblings. Yeah. And I think that's very cool. And I love writing them.
And family, it's also so peculiar because in some ways they're the people we kind of love the most, but at the same time are the angriest sometimes and the meanest the most. Yeah. Especially like cousins. Like we almost grow up. In Portugal is the same as well, or at least it was in my time. I had loads of cousins, and our parents were at work, so the older ones would take care of the younger ones. So it's you create those relationships. These books talk about your culture, and your characters reflect your upbringing as well. As a Bangladeshi person who grew up in Ireland, I'm sure a lot of people are glad they now have these books which represent themselves. And did you have any of that growing up?
No, I didn't have it really until I wrote it myself.
Yeah. No, I can imagine that. I kind of made this question almost pretty much knowing what the answer was, but I still wanted to put it out there. And if you had the chance to talk to your teenage self in a time when these stories were not highly available, what would you tell that version of yourself? What would your advice be to her?
I think I would just say, to keep going and that she is not alone because I think like a lot of young queer teenagers or just people who feel very out of place, a teenage me felt very alone and like nobody else really shared like her experience of the world. I think a lot of teens have this experience. So I would just say, you're not alone and pretty soon books will reflect that.
Can you recommend us some books which tackle similar themes or talk about your culture?
Yes. I mean, I can't really talk about any books that are specifically about being queer and Muslim or queer and Bangladeshi, but a couple of books about queerness. Literally had this in my head before I got in this interview.
You can check it out if you need.
No, I didn't even write it down because I was like, it's in my head. I'm going to remember. Actually, no, I remember. Okay. A fantastic book about queer Muslims, I think, is Arvin Ahmadi's This Is How It All Blew Up. I think it's a fantastic book. It really looks into like what the experience is of being queer and growing up in a Muslim family and not necessarily even connecting with your faith, but still having to always think about that because of your family. And it's not even about, about your family not necessarily accepting you, but just that fear and feeling like you're always counting down to the moment when they're going to find out and what is going to happen. I think it's a really fantastic book. I was like sobbing like reading it. It was fantastic. I recommend that.
You moved to Ireland at the age of 10. How is your experience living in between two cultures? Because from what you said, the Bangladeshi culture is also very prominent in your life. And is there anything about those countries that you identify the most with?
Yeah, so I think I got very lucky in that I moved to Ireland because we moved because obviously my dad was looking for a job
Mhm.
and he was looking to move to the UK because we have a lot of family in the UK, but he ended up finding a job in Ireland. And I think I'm very lucky because in a lot of ways, Ireland and Bangladesh share similar history. We were both, colonized by the British. We're both these small islands who are neighbors with much bigger, sorry, Bangladesh is not an island, but we're very small countries, very small countries, right beside like much bigger, more powerful countries, who often affect, our politics and affect like what happens in our own countries. We both had to deal with partition. We both had to deal with conflicts with our language in different ways, but it's still there. So I think I got very lucky in that because just in a lot of ways, the countries are very, very similar. So I think when I was learning about, Irish history and everything that happened in Ireland, it was easy for me to also identify that with my Bangladeshi culture and Bangladeshi history. In terms of culture, they are very different. Obviously, Ireland is majority white and Irish people now enjoy a lot of privileges, which they didn't until very recently. But I do think there are a lot of similarities. And I think Irish people, they have an understanding of what it feels like to go through colonization, to go through all of these things. So yeah, it's been great living between these two cultures. I think they're both brilliant cultures and I'm glad to be a part of them both.
And what is your favorite thing about Bangladesh and about Ireland?
Favorite thing about Bangladesh, I really like, the sense of community that Bangladeshi people have, the sense of pride as well, because I think like nationalism is not great or like patriotism, I think can get like a little bit too much.
Mhm.
But I like the way that we have it in Bangladesh because it's actually pride in language. That's what I kind of grew up with. Because my parents will always say to me that Bangladesh is the only country in the world where people died for the right to speak their language. And that's why we have International Mother Language Day on the 22nd of February, because that was the day when, people from Bangladesh died during our national language movement. So this is like a really big part of our culture, and this is why, you know, we really honor our language, I feel, or we're taught to honor our language. So I really love this about us, and through that I also love like our sense of community. I feel like Bangladeshi people, anywhere you go, if there's like a small pocket of Bangladeshi people, they will form a community and they will support each other, which is really lovely. Ireland, there's a lot of things I also love about Ireland. I really love like how the people are very kind and they're very laid back, because Bangladeshi people are not like that at all. So it is nice to have that contrast.
Going back to the writing, what is the most challenging part of writing and publishing a book?
There are so many challenging parts.
We have time. You can list them.
I think probably the most challenging part is revising. And I say this because I think when you're writing, you can just sit down and you can write whatever. But when you're revising, it's really about you're taking apart the book and then you have to put it back together. And that can be really challenging. So with revisions, I find like I can technically do my revisions, like the actual writing part of the revisions. I could probably do that in like a week, but it takes me like weeks and weeks to just think about, you know, what is going to happen? How am I going to fix all of these problems? So I think it can be very difficult, but rewarding when you're revising a book.
And what's your favorite part?
My favorite part, so for writing a romance, my favorite part are writing the really like sweet scenes. So like the scenes where, you know, the characters kiss for the first time, or you see like the romance blooming in the characters. I always come up with those scenes before I come up with anything else. And then I have to like hold on to them so I can write the rest of the book. So they're my favorite parts to write.
Is there any time in which you were writing like key scenes for the books and then you kind of figure out that the path you're building up to them isn't working well?
No, because I think of the scenes and then I figure out how I'm going to get to these scenes.
Oh, okay. Because for me, that always seems kind of to be a lot of trouble. You have those points and then your characters aren't doing what you want to get there.
No, this is why I never write them down, because they're not solid. So it's just like this idea of the scene. So then I can build up to them and I can write the scene as the book needs it to be.
So that's a tip on how to do it. Talk to us about the playlist you made, because you made playlists both for the Hannah Wars and for Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating. And talk about how music fuels your inspiration while writing.
Actually, with the Hannah Wars, I think I got very lucky because when I was writing one of the drafts, Hayley Kiyoko's album Expectations came out, and then Janelle Monáe's album Dirty Computer came out, and they were both like, I was listening to them like on repeat for the entire process. So that was awesome. But yeah, music is great for me for writing. I don't actually listen to music when I am doing the writing itself, but it helps me get into the voice of my character. So I try to build a playlist while I'm writing, or before I write, or after I write, whenever it like fits me. And it's essentially like if I get stuck and I'm like, I don't know how to write this, or I feel like I've forgotten the voice of my characters or what the mood is supposed to be here, I can go and listen to some of the music and hopefully it'll like get me back to where I need to be.
And when you make the playlists, do you kind of connect scenes to which song that you're putting together?
No, I mostly connect the mood. That's the most important thing to me.
Because I was curious about how the playlist was put together. So if you would kind of choose songs depending on the mood, or if it was more like during the creative process. So
I think it's because I don't just sit down and put the playlist together. Sometimes like I'll get bored. I'll be like, okay, I'm writing this book. Let me think of some music that can go along with it. And then I'll add some music. And then later I'll come back and be like, this isn't working. And I'll delete some stuff. Add some stuff. So it's a process.
That's cool, because sometimes I think it can be difficult to focus on what you're reading, and personally music really helps. So if you already have like this playlist that you can put together and kind of see where the author was, that's a really cool thing. You have written an enemies to lovers and a fake dating trope, which I've read are your favorite tropes. What's a trope you'd like to write next?
I really want to write all tropes. And the reason
Yay.
for that is because I feel like these tropes don't really exist for people like me, or haven't really existed for people like me.
Mhm.
Like I have read I read a really good fake dating trope that was sapphic, which I really loved. But it was just the one. And
Mhm.
now, thankfully, in 2020, we have a few more coming out,
Mhm.
which is awesome. Kelly Quinlan's She Drives Me Crazy is one of them, and I think it's fantastic. And it's also Enemies to Lovers, actually. So it's like 2 for 1, which is great. But for me, I think I love tropes, especially in romance, because I just think they're super fun, and I love exploring them, and I love taking them and trying to figure out how I can make them my own and how I can make them fit my characters and my story. So I would just love to take basically every trope and try and make it Sapphic and Bengali and see what happens.
That's great news, because then we have a lot to look forward to. So I think most people, even when they complain about tropes, they love them. They would go back to them over and over again because it works.
Yeah. I mean, I think stories can't really exist without tropes. Like
Yeah,
everything is technically a trope. So
that's true. Makes sense. We want to talk about trigger warnings and their importance because you always put trigger warnings in your books, which I think is great. But would you like to talk about that?
yeah, so I think trigger warnings are really great. And I think they should be included in every single book, just because I know that I have read things that I've gone into without expecting certain things and being triggered. And that's even happened to me, like, because I used to be a reviewer, and I would get people sending me books, and like the description would be one thing, and then I'd go in and I just read something that I wasn't expecting, and then I would be triggered, and I wouldn't be actually able to write a proper review of that book. I wouldn't really be able to even work for like weeks, depending on how much I was triggered. So that definitely happened to me, and I don't want that to happen to one of my readers. I want my readers to have a safe experience of reading, and I know that I will read books that have triggering material for me.
Mhm.
But if I know that it can trigger me, then I can prepare myself, and I will most likely not be triggered. So I want to have a safe experience when I'm reading, and I want my readers to have that experience too.
Because people complain due to spoilers. I don't think
Yeah, which
that's
I don't think that's true, because I don't know, like there are trigger warnings on my books, but I don't think it can ever spoil you, because they're completely decontextualized.
yeah,
So I don't think decontextualized triggers can be a spoiler.
yeah, I agree. Was it difficult to conciliate writing with teaching? And do you have a writing routine?
Yes, it was very difficult, because I am a very introverted person. So teaching for me has always been very draining. I really enjoy it,
Mhm.
but it is, you have to be very present when you're teaching. You have to always kind of be on and available for your students. So when I was teaching, I would find that I would teach all day, and then I'd come home and I just have no energy left. So I think like not half of, but some of 2018, most of 2019, I was so drained from teaching and writing at the same time that I essentially like got like 2 or 3 hours of sleep like every night. So I was
Wow.
exhausted all the time. And then when I quit my job, I felt like a lot better. I was a lot healthier. So yeah, it was very draining for me to teach, just because I'm introverted. I know it's not that for like everyone. I do love teaching. I'd love to go back to it at some point, but not right now.
And when did you figure out it was the right time to write full time and quit teaching?
I think I was having a lot of conversations with my friends who are also authors about this, and I was trying to figure it out, because obviously I want to have like a safety net in terms of like finances and stuff. I think it's a lot better here in Europe to be a full-time writer,
Mhm.
because our taxes are different than in the US. which is good. So I do have that privilege, and I thought that I am able to take some time off from teaching now. So that's how I think of it in general. Like, rather than I am now a full-time writer, I think of it as taking some time off, and I know that I can go back at any point that I want to and when I require it. So yeah, I just thought, well, now I can do it, so let me do it for a little bit, especially because I'm writing and I'm going to start promoting my book soon, and I know it's going to be too much. So I decided to take that time off, and yeah, it was a really good decision for me.
And do you have a routine now? Do you have to like,
Oh.
is it like do you do it like a job, or is more like when inspiration kind of strikes and you try to write every day?
Neither of those, to be honest. I I don't like having a writing routine. I've never liked that because I think routines for me really stop my flow of creativity. So I have like, if I have to write, I will write down on my to-do list, like I have to write this many words today, or I have to write for this many hours or this many chapters. And then I will try to do them whenever I can during the day. But also I think with, one book coming out and working on some other stuff, I find that it's not just writing, it's also doing a lot of like admin work, emails, doing like something like this podcast or events, different things. That all feeds into your writing time. And
Social media as
it's
well.
honestly like more than a full-time job. Yeah, social media as well. Because a lot of the times it feels like more than a full-time job, like there can be days where you barely have time to like sit down or breathe. But yeah, there are just days where like I'll be super busy. It'll be more than like a 9 to 5. And then there'll be days where I have like the entire day free to do whatever I want.
Great.
So
you wrote 2 books which were published during a global pandemic, and they both did pretty well. Do you have any tips for debut authors?
I would say it's difficult because yes, my books did come out in a global pandemic, and my second book will most likely come out also during a pandemic, during like serious lockdown. And I have to say, the Henna Wars came out both in the US and in the UK during the worst times of lockdown, where everything was closed. So it was like not a fun experience in terms of that. But I just try to think of how I want to celebrate my book and how I wanted to, I guess, spread the joy of it or spread the love for it. I wasn't, thinking constantly about sales. I was just trying to think of the fact that I want this book to reach readers, and whether it does that, now or it does it later, my book is always going to exist, and I just want to get it out there. So everything that I did, doing events, tweeting about it or whatever, I was just doing it because I love my book. I wanted to reach the readers that I know are going to connect with it. So I think that's how we need to think of it, rather than in terms of, the numbers, because you don't know the numbers, and I don't think that's really going to help. Just think about, why you wrote your book, who you wanted to reach, and try to project that onto the world, I guess.
And I suppose it's gonna keep people company as well during lockdown, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah, that is true.
Are you working on something else right now? And by something else, I mean more specifically another book right now.
Yes, I am working on a couple of different things right now. I can't really talk about it because I don't like talking about things as I'm working on them, but hopefully I will have things to share in the near future.
Great. That's good to hear. Do you have any plans for a book tour this year, online or otherwise, if the times allow it?
I don't think the times will allow an otherwise book tour, unfortunately. But I would love to do, more like online events. For the Henna Wars launch in the US, I organized like an entire launch week for myself. So I would love to do something similar for Hani And Ishu. I have some exciting plans for that book coming out. So yeah, I would love to do something, but I don't have anything planned right now.
And where can people find you online? And also, in case more things come up for the book tour, where can they find you?
So my website is adibajaigirdar.com, and on Twitter I am at adiba_j, and on Instagram I am on dibs_j.
This is the last question of the podcast. It's a question I ask everyone, and I ask for a favorite all-time book and a book you would recommend right now.
So a favorite book of all time is Edwidge Danticat's Krak. It's a book of short stories, and it is one of my favorite pieces of literature. I think it's wonderful writing, and Edwidge Danticat is one of my favorite writers of all time. She's wonderful. So I definitely recommend checking that out. A book I would recommend right now is my friend Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé's upcoming book, Ace of Spades, which is Get Out meets Gossip Girl. It's an amazing thriller, and I highly recommend checking it out. It's out, I think, June 1st.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can access today's show's notes via my pod page, which you can find along with all of my social media links at linktree/Karina Pereira. In there, you'll also find a link to a Story of Sorts playlist available on Libra FM, containing the audiobooks recommended by our guests, which will be updated as the show progresses. If you'd like to give Libra FM a try, you can use the code A Story of Sorts at checkout to get 2 books for the price of 1. This offer is valid for new Libra FM members in the US and Canada. Libra FM is an audiobook platform which allows you to buy audiobooks directly from an indie bookstore. Check them out. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting A Story of Sorts on Patreon. Patreon is a platform which allows you to contribute monthly to the podcast in exchange for extra content, such as early access to episodes, a shout out at the end of an episode and on Instagram, and choosing a theme for me to talk about on the podcast. You can become a patron at patreon.com/A Story of Sorts. I'd also be very grateful if you would simply leave a review and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. As usual, I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new interview. I'll talk to you then, and thank you for listening.